I've got a bit of a headache since I've been reading small text on a monitor since I woke up, and I need to take a break to close my eyes and lay on the floor and take it easy a little bit. So I figured I could ramble on about something that's been on my mind a little bit, just a little bit, that I don't have an answer to, but I want to discuss nevertheless. It's a chicken or the egg conundrum in regards bishoujo game and anime. So the question at hand, or I guess I should say the problem that I'm faced with, is whether or not bishoujo game are influenced by anime, or anime is influenced by bishoujo games. Because when you think about it, like you go back a little bit, because I was thinking about mid 2000s visual novel adaptations in anime, which is something that I'm very fond of from that era. You see shows, obviously you got your key anime, but I really don't count those since they're larger productions handled by Kyoto Animation, which almost guarantees their success just by them adapting it. But I was speaking more of along the lines of stuff like Myself Yourself, or you get even shittier like Yoake Mai, which was a terrible show. But I think the visual novel for that is popular. I'm gonna say visual novel and bishoujo game and galge and eroge interchangeably throughout, but I mean the exact same thing. There's a lot of other shows that are like that I can't think of off the top of my head necessarily. Well, you got stuff like Da Capo, obviously, but that's another big one. There's a few other more niche titles, but I digress. So shows like that, you could trace their lineage back to their game counterparts. Like if you focus on, for example, I'm familiar with the series Two Heart developed by Leaf. I played through Konami's route on Two Heart 2. I haven't played the other routes because I wasn't very fond of the other heroines as I played through the game. But I might return to that one day, I might not. I just wanted to finish Konami just to do it. But that has an anime adaptation. I have the DVD laying somewhere behind my head right now, but I'm not going to reach for it because I'm lazy. But Two Heart 2 had an anime, and so did its originator, or progenitor, its predecessor, Two Heart, in 1999. It's a very interesting adaptation. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very comfy show. It's, like I said, it was released in 1999. I don't even know who fucking animated it. But it was one of the very first TV adaptations, or TV anime adaptations of a bishoujo game. Two Heart being one of the bishoujo game. Like, the bishoujo game to end all bishoujo games. Like, you got shit like Two Heart, and then you got Da Capo, and then you got some of the key stuff, but like, those are the bishoujo games. Like, in terms of brand recognition, they're up there, which eludes me a little bit since Two Heart only has 2 entries, I believe. I think there's a Two Heart 3 in the works, but I'm not really too familiar with that. Nor does it matter. Then you got Da Capo, which has, I know for a fact Da Capo 4 is being developed and it might be out already, but they have 3 entries in Da Capo, 3 mainline entries released, all of which are translated into English. Then there's like countless spin-offs, like spin-offs for every single fucking game in that franchise. Like, you could get lost in that fucking franchise, which I think is what they want. And I guarantee you lots of people have. But these are some of the the big hitters in within the bishoujo game sphere in terms of popularity. And I chose to focus on Two Heart since I'm more familiar with that series than Da Capo. I've only really played a little bit of Da Capo before Da Capo 2, I should say, before realizing that that some of the routes are not unlocked from the get go. Like it's one of those games where you have to clear a route with one of the side heroines first before you can move on to romance one of the main heroines, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in eroge. Just in general, when you have routes locked behind endings. This is the reason why I never finished reading Hoshi Memo, because I wanted to romance the loli. Was her name Mare? I think it was Mare. But I wanted to romance her. I wanted to get her route because she was clearly the most interesting character. But instead, you have to follow a set order in the routes, and I'm just like, this isn't fucking happening. I'm not gonna clear a route for the stupid Osana Najimi that I don't give a damn about, and isn't even a good character to begin with. So I kind of gave up on that game. But returning to what I was talking about in the first place before I got sidetracked discussing Two Heart and lolis, you can trace the lineage of these anime adaptations all the way back to hentai OVAs. Interestingly enough, since those were some of the first adaptations of eroge to begin with. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. It might have been like Dokyusei got an 18 plus anime. I think there might have been something else before that. I have a feeling it was Dokyusei, and if not, Dokyusei was one of the very first big franchises to get a anime adaptation, which is usually an indicator of success within this type of media, like manga and games and whatnot. If you have an anime, you've made it. But when it originally started, you had a lot of 18 plus hentai OVAs being produced, since it was a relatively new thing. Because even at the time, in the mid to early 90s, you had bishoujo game and eroge. In Japan, they're referred to as adventure games, not visual novels. But you had adventure games being first developed and becoming first popularized thanks to stuff like Tokimeki Memorial, developed by not Capcom, developed by Konami. Remember Konami? But those were the games that originally started to popularize that format of game in the first place. So with games like Tokimemo popularizing the dating sim as we refer to it in the West, or just a bishoujo game where you romance girls and make them fall in love with you under that promised tree outside. You started to naturally have offers for anime. I think in the anime industry tested the water with hentai OVAs, since OVAs are generally marketed towards an older demographic of people. Like it was during this time that you had a lot of OVAs released. A lot of people refer to them as these hyper-violent, hyper-sexual 90s OVAs that a lot of fans are fond of. I think they're very interesting that they exist. And the reason they exist in the first place is because you have to look back to anime fans in general. I'm gonna take a huge detour here and talk about 0079 Gundam, which I put my finger on as one of the major turning points in the industry, or at least a very key point. Because obviously you had anime before that. You had like Tezuka shit, but after Gundam, let's say Gundam, I one day I was thinking about this, that let's say, I don't know, like you're 10 or something and you're watching 0079 Gundam, or like 15 or something, ostensibly, let's just say it's 1980 and you're 15. By 1990s, you're already 25, and by the mid 90s, you're 30, you have a job, and presumably you're still an anime fan, which is what I suspect why you started to see a greater shift towards more mature themes in a lot of shows. Like you got to see Bebop, for example. Um, but it's partially the reason why you see a lot of OVAs being released, starting with that. What's his name? Uh, Mamoru Oshii's Dallos. I believe that might have been late '80s, but you started to see a lot of OVAs, especially produced by Madhouse. I think like Wicked City and stuff, and Demon. I don't think Demon City Shinjuku was Madhouse, but I might be wrong. But you started to see a lot of OVAs of that flavor. It's because the anime fans who grew up watching 0079 Gundam, the OG, are likely now, if they are still a fan in the first place, they are in their 30s and they have a very relatively stable income because they're a salaryman. Obviously, this is subject to change because it was during this time Japan was experiencing the most tumultuous time in its economic history since post-war, which was the lost decade, but I'm not going to get into that. But essentially, these OVAs were crowdfunded because they calculated that the people who they were marketing towards and catering towards these OVAs were the people with the money, which were 30-something-year-old salarymen who wanted to see violence and tits. So that's why that format worked, and I think that's why you started to see a lot of visual novels and, to that extent, bishoujo game release OVAs to test the waters beforehand, before eventually moving on into full-length series. I think there was another series before Two Heart 1999 that was based off a visual novel, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But I know for a fact it's not like a traditional school romance show. I believe Two Heart 1999 was the first very traditional, very like what you think of when you think of a dating sim type of adaptation. Um, Also, a side note: Kawasumi Ayako, who did the voice of what's her? I totally I'm blanking on her name. The main heroine of Two Heart. I want to say it's Akane, but that's only because Aka is in it and her hair is red. It will return to me in a couple seconds. I can't believe I forgot that. After Two Heart, and Two Heart, the game itself should not be understated how popular it was, since it was the big one of the games that revolutionized the visual novel market. Because I believe it may have predated Tokimemo, if not, it was sort of taking what Tokimemo did and do it better, refining a lot of the things Tokimemo might have had rough around the edges and make it a little bit more accessible and whatnot. And at this point, we see a turning point here. Because afterwards, we start to see the birth of Nakige and the key trilogy of canon, Air, and Clannad, and then the rest is history. But I want to talk a little bit more about this time in particular, specifically about the genre influences. Because I was thinking earlier about how Love Hina and other shows from this time, like Onegai Teacher, that's a little bit further on in the future, and Aiyori Aoshi, they feel very influenced by these types of visual novels and bishoujo game that it's hard not to ignore the influence of them. That for a while I thought Aiyori Aoshi was based off of some sort of visual novel beforehand. Since there is a visual novel for that series, though I believe it was only released after the fact. Um, but it makes perfect sense that it kind of is, since it's one of those under one roof, um, with lots of attractive girls and one guy. That brand of humor, which I believe can be attributed to the popularity of Love Hina. Love Hina was made in the early 2000s, if not like the very late 90s. And the reason I mentioned Love Hina is because Love Hina is very much influenced by the works of uh, Takashi Rumiko, if that's her name, I'm saying it correctly, um, who, as we know, pretty much everybody knows that she did like Ranma One Half, Urusei Yatsura, My Son Ikoku, uh, and whatnot. Obviously Inuyasha, but um, you look at shows like specifically Urusei Yatsura. When I was watching, I haven't seen the show, but I've watched a couple of the films, specifically Beautiful Dreamer, since Oshii did it. But you see Urusei Yatsura, and then you see modern anime, and you're like, there is nothing different between these two things, because for all intents and purposes, To Love Ru is a ripoff of Urusei Yatsura, except they just made it more horny. They're the same exact type of show with an alien girlfriend and comedy antics that go on for way too long. A lot of the it was such a weird experience watching Urusei Yatsura, since it's essentially no different than To Love Ru, and they play the same gags. And one of them came out in the 70s, and the other one came out in the 2000s and the 2010s, and you're just like, nothing's changed. Um, but I digress. So, anyways, returning to Takashi Rumiko, in her manga, that you could see this under one roof with comedy and absurd, like the specific brand of comedy, the slightly absurd but still grounded, very slapstick, very Japanese, for lack of better words, brand of comedy that would carry on later into manga like Love Hina. But I believe that a lot of these visual novels were drawing influence from Rumiko's work, specifically stuff like Urusei Yatsura. Urusei Yatsura is significant because uh, Damu from the show, or Lum, or whatever you want to call her, but Ramu from Urusei Yatsura was the sex icon of the time. She was, I think Ramu was the reason why cosplay became a thing. Also like Gundam and stuff. Like obviously you had autistic Gundam fans LARPing as like Char Aznable and shit outside, but Damu was significant because she was a woman, and you would go to Comic Cat, which was starting to become popular at the time, and you see like 3D PD women dressed up in like the skimpy what do you even call it? Like the tiger stripe bikini thing with the horns that Ramu would wear, and then like you obviously see these otaku who have never seen another woman at Comic Con, just like they see a girl and they're like, oh shit, oh shit, guys. Um, but anyways, like you had the beginnings, the buddings of the future otaku landscape, buddings because moe, and moe literally means to bud. Um, Used intentionally there. Word choice is fun, but the problem, the returning to the main problem at hand, is about the origins of these types of shows. I mentioned earlier Onegai Teacher. And Onegai Teacher feels very much like it was based off a visual novel, with a lot of the aspects that it has, and you have a lot of a lot of love interests, and generally just the way it's structured, and the opening itself, like mostly the soundtrack is very synth oriented, and a lot of visual novels would use synth soundtracks, since obviously they're easier to produce for because you just hire one guy and a keyboard versus having an orchestral score that a lot of the other games from this time would be going for, like Final Fantasy. So you just get a guy with a keyboard or a guy with just a regular ass piano, and he records the music for you. Um, but Onegai Teacher felt very much like a visual novel with a lot of the more atmospheric elements as well. A lot of visual novels tend to have, or especially around this time, tended to have at least some elements of magical realism to them. Likely thanks to the popularization of the Key trilogy. Key, one of their major tenets in their stories are magical realism. You will see this throughout their stories from canon to Air to Clannad. Even before that, one Kagayatsu Ki Setsue, which wasn't developed by Key per se, but a lot of the team behind future Key works would be there, like a lot of the scenario writers. And I believe Maeda Jun was even on that project, if I'm not mistaken, though I likely am. But that show, well, I only watched the OVA for that. But that visual novel had a lot of magical realism aspects to it as well. Um, but a lot of those aspects carry over uh, to Onegai Teacher, which feels very, like I said, it feels very much like a visual novel, though it was never intended. I mean, it was never adapted from one. However, it feels like what they were trying to go for was what was popular at the time, perhaps, or maybe they were explicitly going for this type of visual novel, bishoujo game, a little bit more melancholic, a little bit more atmospheric type of storytelling. Um, Obviously, giving it a little bit too much credit because like it's not the deepest story in the world. It's still a romance between a student and a MILF teacher who happens to be an alien. You see that connection to Urusei Yatsura there? Um, and and additionally, like you obviously see a lot of influence from Sekai K, which is drawn influenced from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Once again, the continues to be very important in discussion of this, but like Sekai K is like what you see uh, what's his name, Shinkai Makoto, his films like A Place Promised in Our Early Days. I think that was his first one. It might not be. No, Voices from a Distant Star was his first OVA slash film slash project animation thing, um, which is essentially Sekai K is a story about, or is characterized by, um, it's usually they're with a almost always they're with a male protagonist, and there's a larger issue at hand that they have absolutely no power over, and they usually revolve around a girl in some sort of romance. A good example of Sekai K besides Evangelion and Voices from a Distant Star is Iria no Sora UFO no Natsu, or Ilia Sky Summer of UFOs, which is a story about a girl and a guy. The guy falls in love with the girl, but the girl has to pilot an airship to battle aliens, and he literally can do nothing about it, and he knows the girl is gonna die. That type of thing is Sekai K, and this kind of seeps into visual novels to some to some extent, since you see a lot of visual novels like or not even visual novels but anime like Onegai Teacher, where the teacher is an alien, where they have absolutely no control over things outside of their, like they obviously have no control over. Um, but in terms of a more grounded story, returning to stuff like Two Heart and the original problem at hand, is it the chicken or the egg conundrum? Did visual novels influence anime, or did anime influence visual novels? I think obviously the easy answer is to say the anime influenced visual novels since the whole art style thing, um, and how visual novels had anime styled art, but to a certain extent, visual novels started to influence anime as well. You started to see stuff like I mentioned Onegai Teacher do with its type of stories, and then you also started to see a lot of other influences in weird places, like I said, Love Hina, which, without a doubt, was likely influenced by the bishoujo game boom of the late 90s and early 2000s, which was very, very important to things within the general otaku landscape, since that was the otaku thing to do at that time. So if I had to say, and if I had to conclude, which came first, I would say that there's no easy answer, because like I said, it's a give and take type of relationship that I feel that without one you wouldn't have the other. Eroge is influenced by anime just as much as anime is influenced by eroge. And I don't mean it in the most general sense, since it's a little bit more complicated, since anime is not really as niche and as streamlined of a medium as, say, eroge and bishoujo game and whatever. Since bishoujo game are obviously more niche, there's a different overlap here, since anime is kind of its own thing. But when you look at a bishoujo game fan, the likelihood that that fan is also into anime is almost 100%. So obviously there's going to be a lot of influence from anime in eroge. And the type of things that you would see in eroge is things that you'll see in anime, such as your everybody's favorite accidental boob grabs, panty shots, and random comedy moments that fill the air and whatnot, and mascot characters. But then the other way around, it's a little bit less clear to see the influence of eroge within anime, since you would have to essentially find the most egregious types of these tropes and try to trace their lineage back to somewhere. And I think even if we trace the lineage of such tropes all the way back to Takeshi Rumiko, she will probably have someone that she took those ideas from as well. This shit is all super incestuous and kind of weird, but also really cool to think about when you start to see the connections between a lot of these various mediums of this very niche type of entertainment subset thing. And then like, it isn't very surprising either. It's more interesting than it is surprising. I'm not surprised in the slightest, since it seems that it was only inevitable, since like I said, you would track down an otaku walking around in Japan during this time, let's say like 2003, 2005, even now. If that guy is playing an eroge, the likelihood that he also reads manga, watches anime, and plays video games is almost a guaranteed. It's part of the whole genre. It's part of the whole culture, the language of this type of thing. So initially, you had things like the very early visual novels like Tokimemo and Two Heart drawing influence from anime. They're kind of doing their own thing a little bit, but always referencing back to anime and some of the predecessors, like the works of Takeshi Rumiko and various other comedy, rom-com type of shit, whatever manga was coming out in the 80s and 70s that were popular. They couldn't not be drawing influence from them. And then when they're adapted into anime, the tropes within those visual novels suddenly become part of the anime canon. If there was a trope within Two Heart, let's say, let's talk about, for example, the Osana Najimi that comes to wake up the protagonist every morning, which became a staple of the Two Heart franchise, but is also seen in almost every other visual novel with an Osana Najimi main character. That suddenly became part of the anime language as well. And the greater otaku culture and understanding of what bishoujo is, what moe is. So it's a universal language that is very incestuous and breeds across various types of media. But at the end of the day, when you get down to it, it's all part of the same language of otaku. And I don't know if that makes sense. I started to go down a weird rambling, winding tangent towards the end, and I retread the same ground way too many times. But hopefully that gets gets my point across to some extent.